He even exalted himself. Listen to this because it confirms what we've been talking about. He even, the little horn, the beast of Revelation 13, the first, the world leader, he even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host. As the prince of the host. So in the negative sense of prince of the host, it would be Halel, who I said is also called Sabaoth. So he will be as Halel, Lucifer, the mighty one of this earth, but being in earth, that's why he receives authority from the dragon. But because of what we read around, well, the rest of Daniel, and in this chapter, prince is Michael, who, like I said, will come down as one of the two witnesses and be killed by the beast. So the world leader will be so fooled by his power and everything that he will even go against the one that Yahweh will set up as king of the world, as king of kings. So the one that Yahweh will place as the king, the beast, will believe to be higher than him and kill him, which is interesting because of the way it is written. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host, which pretty much says that is the highest that one can get, because it is the one that is close to Yahweh, is like right next to Yahweh. So that would be the highest. That's why he's gonna exalt himself even to that point, just like Lucifer did, like he wanted in Isaiah 14. So he even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host. That is verse 11. Oh, let me see in Hebrew. Yes, Sar Hatzavah, the prince of the host. If we were to look, if we look for the word prince in the book of Daniel, in other books, but it would take forever, of course. It would take a while. So I'm just going to do it with Daniel, and then I'll mention another. In this chapter, what we just read, he even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host. In a little bit later, in this chapter, which we are going to read it, so I'm going to wait for that one. Verse 25, this one is mentioned again, since the explanation is going to be given to Daniel. But then in Daniel 9:6, well, no, not that one, just a second. In Daniel 9:25, as we will read next week, Mashiach Nagid is what appears in Hebrew, that Mashiach Nagid would appear. Mashiach represents the first coming, Nagid the second coming. Now, in that case is Nagid, the word that is being used, which is a synonym of Sar. Sar is mostly used for the Malachim, for the angels. So it's pretty much as saying that the Malach, the Sar, will become a Nagid when Mikael becomes a man. So it goes from Sar to Nagid. So my point is that even though in Daniel is mentioned or translated as prince, is a different word in Hebrew than the one that was used in Daniel 8. But pretty much represents the same person, as we see when we connect the other parts where that prince is mentioned. In Daniel 10:21, it says, "But I will tell you what is noted in the scripture of truth," which is pretty much a scripture in the heavens. So just like we have a scripture here, the Malachim have a scripture in their reality. So they both have to be fulfilled. That's why one comes from, that's why first and last, to make the connection of heaven and earth. So it says, "But I will tell you what is noted in the scripture of truth. No one upholds me against these except Michael, your prince." Except Michael, your prince. In this case, in Hebrew, it says your Sar, your prince. So now this is the same that was used in Daniel 8, Sar. So here in chapter 10, as we will see, pretty much Yahushua is telling Daniel that the only one that helps him in heaven is Michael. So that's why is Michael the one that has to come down to give testimony of Yahushua, who is the only one who gives testimony of him. And that's why he's first and last. And that is the Malach who will become an entrance to the other reality. For Malachim cannot enter the other reality unless they accept what Michael will testify, which is that Yahushua is Mashiach. But Michael is the only one that upholds the truth. That's why in the scripture of truth, no one upholds me against these except Michael, your Sar, your prince. So that's why in Daniel 8 it said he even exalted himself as high as the Sar of the host, which would be, since the beast is evil, he is exalting himself against a positive host. And those hosts, that army, fight for Michael, who would be their leader. Well, they fight for Yahweh, and the leader would be Michael, who Yahweh placed as his representation ahead of them. So, in Daniel 11:22, it says, with the force of a flood, they shall be swept away from before him and be broken. Those who come against the beast, they will be swept like with a flood. Like we see in Revelation 12 that the beast will throw a flood. Well, the serpent, which is the dragon when it falls, will throw a flood, which is pretty much the army of the beast, to kill the chosen. But Yahweh will protect them, and then they will kill the many. So it says, with the force of a flood they shall be swept away from before him and be broken. And also the prince of the covenant. And also the prince of the covenant. So we just saw that Michael is the prince of Israel. We saw that the beast will go against the prince of the army of Yahweh. Now we see that the beast will even be able to kill the prince of the covenant. In this case, it says the word Nagid, which is amazing, because it's the Nagid of Daniel 9 that I mentioned, which is pretty much Michael, the Sar, as a man, Nagid, as a prince who will become king. The fact that it says Nagid in this part is important, because the Nagid of Daniel 9, Christians say that is the Antichrist. They say that is the beast, which they mix as one. They are not, but they mix it. And that Nagid is not evil. We see here that is the Nagid of the covenant. So please follow me here. We will see that next week, I guess, clearer, but I hope you get it now. Sar as the Malach, Nagid as the human. Mashiach Nagid appeared 2,000 years ago. They cut Mashiach, they killed Mashiach. So now the Nagid has to manifest, the prince, who is Michael, the Sar, as a human, Nagid. He will confirm the covenant. That's why he's called the Prince of the Covenant, because he confirms the covenant of Daniel 9. Yet, because of many things that they don't understand, and I will explain next week, they claim that Nagid is the beast, who they also think is the Antichrist. So they claim that the beast and the Antichrist are the same, and they happen to be the prince that confirms the covenant, according to Daniel 9. The prince that confirms the covenant to Christians is the beast. But now we see here in Daniel 11 that the beast will kill the prince of the covenant. So that makes no sense, because in the Christian doctrine it is the same person. The beast is the prince of the covenant, so he will be committing suicide. And that is not the case. That is not what is being said here. So that shows that the doctrine in Christianity makes no sense, because it has a lot of contradictions, a lot of holes in the doctrine. So in this case, Daniel 11:22, with the force of a flood they shall be swept away from before him and be broken, and also the prince of the covenant, the Nagid that confirmed the covenant in Daniel 9, will be killed by the beast, who is not the prince that confirms the covenant. And the fact that they interpret it like that is the reason why Christians are waiting for a peace treaty in Israel in order to believe that everything started. But everything can start without anything like that. If they do it, it's just to fool the Christians who are waiting for it. Because there are many other false things that are said with that doctrine or issues with it. So this is one of them. The prince of the covenant is positive, for the beast goes against him. And if you go to Malachi, in Malachi 3, it says, "Behold, I send my messenger, that is Eliyahu, and he will prepare the way before me. And Yahweh, whom you seek, well, the sovereign whom you seek, Yahushua, will suddenly come to his temple, his body. Even the messenger of the covenant," that is the second coming. So first and last, the sovereign whom you seek will certainly come to his temple, the first manifestation. And then even the messenger of the covenant in whom you delight, behold, he is coming. That is the second coming, the messenger of the covenant. In this case, in the Hebrew, where it says the messenger of the covenant, just a second, U Malach Haberit, the Malach or the angel, that is Michael, of the covenant. What covenant? The one that Yahushua made and the last confirms as the Sar, who becomes a Nagid, the Nagid of the covenant. Now, as the last example, in Daniel 12:1, we read that it says, "At that time Michael shall stand up." Michael, so we see that in the end, Michael will appear. The great prince, the great Sar, who stands watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble. So the last will stand up and give testimony of Yahushua during the first half of the last 7 years as the great prince who will become the great king. And we see there that is Michael, the great prince, the prince of the covenant. Now, well, the last, I said that was the last, but just one more. In Revelation 19, when the first and last already become one, and Mashiach appears with his army to destroy the evil ones in the war of Har-Megiddo. When he appears, he comes as the leader of the army of the heavens. So we see that he is the prince of the army, the prince of the host, of the true host, not the third of the angels that rebelled against Yahweh, who were a host, and are represented in some books by the name Sabaoth. So in Revelation 19, we read that it says, verse 11, now I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes were like flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. He had a name written that no one knew except himself. In verse 18 says, and the armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, the true congregation, white and clean, followed him on white horses. The armies of the heavens follow the King of Kings, in this case, after he manifested as the Prince of Princes, in which through his death and resurrection becomes the King of Kings. So going back to Daniel 8, and it grew up to the host of heaven, talking about the little horn, and it cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the ground. It will be able to kill set apart people on the earth, and even defeat some of the angels that will come against them and trample them.